So book 5 was The Inflamed Mind, a radical new approach to depression by Edward Bullmore. So the reason why I was attracted to this book was because I went to a psychopharmacology lecture at Manchester University, and it was someone in the audience had asked a question about what did he think about the theory of an inflamed brain causing depression, because I hadn't heard of that before. And the guy who served me in Waterstones had said that it had come out like a year ago, so I didn't even, I hadn't even heard about it or anything. And it was interesting at first. Like, it really grabbed my attention when I first started reading it, because it was talking about how in kind of medicine there's a real kind of dualism of, and it's come from philosophers like Descartes, that believe that the mind and the body are two separate things, and that they're not the same thing, and that they're not connected. So there's kind of like the blood-brain barrier that was believed to completely shut off the brain from what was happening in the rest of the body, but new research has found that that's not the case, and that actually a lot more gets passed across that barrier than what was initially thought of. So Bullmore's kind of arguing and providing lots of empirical research to support it, that things like depression are caused by an inflammation in the body, in the sense that if you have got like a virus that is, in your body, like the cold virus, or you've got a wound that's infected or anything like that, your body becomes inflamed because it's trying to fight off that kind of bacteria or virus or whatever, and the process that goes into like the biology of it. So he says like your macrophage is what I think it's pronounced, kind of go to like or attack that and engulf that, and the enzymes in that kind of break it down, and then they release cytokines into your system. Now that says to your body that you're inflamed, and then that triggers kind of an alert call, so that, what's it called, so lymphocytes will then go and produce the relevant antibodies that are needed to kind of fight that infection and give you some resistance to it. But the suggestion is that if you've got an elevated cytokine level in your blood, that you also then get symptoms of depression, and that depression must have some kind of evolutionary advantage for us to have evolved, for that to be still with us. It's obviously had a survival benefit. So kind of Bullmore goes into a lot of detail about it's probably because you needed to like sleep more and socially withdraw for evolutionary benefits, but he kind of labours the point. I'd have thought it was pretty obvious that if you're infected, that you want to kind of be away from the rest of your tribe so that you don't infect them, and I'd have thought it was pretty obvious that you would want to sleep more and try and give your body rest so that it would be able to fight off the kind of disease or threat that was in the body at the time. So it was a bit obvious to me that, but he laboured it quite a lot, like as if he was trying to convince me of the argument. It's like it's a bit of an obvious argument, I would say. But then he did actually make some points that I hadn't thought of, which was that if you are infected and you're on the edge of a tribe, then you're probably going to be more likely to be attacked by predators, or you're more likely to be kind of at risk of kind of like things in your environment. So things like being anxious and not being able to sleep very well are actually, evolutionary advantages in terms of allowing that person who's infected to survive even in those conditions. Because if you are overly anxious and awakened by anything that's in your environment, if there is a predator, you can get away from it even though you are infected and you're away from that tribe. So that completely makes sense why that happens. So it was kind of like explaining how depression is caused by your body's being inflamed in response to kind of threat. But then what he goes into is he says that nowadays it's more of a social threat or stresses in the environment that are causing the inflammation. It sounds pretty much like our bodies get inflamed by a lot of things, and that it's very, very difficult to kind of keep that inflammation down. And so it would probably explain why a lot of people are depressed and are suffering symptoms of depression, particularly in responses to stress, because it's our body responding to that and trying to keep us alive and not infect other people. But obviously you can't infect another person with social stress, but I guess you could on I guess you could actually, you know, if you are stressed by something in your environment, if you withdraw from that environment, you'll reduce that stress and then you'll reduce that inflammation in your body. So I guess it has got some kind of evolutionary advantage still in that sense. So it's kind of almost like taking an evolutionary explanation to a modern problem, which is something that hasn't been done in terms of the neurochemical explanations for depression and other things like anxiety and psychotic disorder like schizophrenia. Like, there's not really an evolutionary spin looking at it. It's more of a biochemical one because new technology has come about that means that that's kind of the fresh new way of kind of looking at psychology and treating it. You did raise the point actually that even if inflammation was an explanation of why you have depression, by the way, this came from research that it's all backed up with like research studies. It came from somebody with rheumatoid arthritis. How you say it? Rheumatoid. It sounds weird, that, doesn't it? Basically, they would get depressed, and the doctors would say, well, obviously you'd get depressed if you had like a something that was affecting you like lifelong in a chronic way. But what they were neglecting was that actually it was the inflammation in the body and the joints which was causing the depression symptoms. Because they were treating them in a dualistic way, it meant that it was being overlooked. So even if you knew that, what could you do about it? If you went to your doctor and you're like, okay, I'm suffering from inflammation, what would you do? Like, you can't really like measure that, and you can't really kind of combat that in a kind of easy way like you can by popping a pill for neurochemical explanation. So it's no wonder that it's not been taken up and it's not been taken quite seriously. And as well, because there's not that combined thinking of the medical profession and the psychiatric profession, it means that you haven't got that joint up holistic thinking that would probably find some solution to something like depression. I think it was talking a lot about trials that have been done on SSRIs like Prozac, and actually a lot of the trials had been it's like it costs so much money to do the trials that it's no wonder that people aren't, you know, funding them and looking into them, because most of them fail. Most of them don't find to be relevant to people in terms of treating them and getting rid of the depression. It's kind of looking like depression manifests in people in different ways and due to different causes, and that inflammation in the body might be one of them. There could also be social explanation and stuff like that, and that actually, like, when you've got cancer and you use a plethora of drugs to kind of combat it, you might use like some therapy, and you might use some kind of radiation, and you might use surgery. You put it all together. It's a similar thing in depression as well. Like, what type of combination can you put together to kind of, you know, sort it out? And that's not very scientific to do that. It's not like, okay, take this drug and it'll increase your serotonin and then you'll be okay. It's not. That's why it's not got passed. That's why people are still clinging to the biochemical explanation of it and not actually looking into anything else. A lot of the studies on the drugs as well that are done on mice initially, and they held them upside down by their tail, and then if the rat became sleepy, then the drug got further testing because it mimicked the side effects of the other drugs that had been passed, like Prozac, the SSRIs. So there could be other drugs out there which are actually really effective for mental health issues like depression that aren't getting passed because they're not being done in the best way and not being investigated in the best way, and because the money's not there for it. You know, it's going to be an epidemic in, you know, 50 years time, where there's going to be a high percentage of people that are killing themselves because of depression. So, you know, if something's not done about it soon, like, we're going to be like in a really bad situation. So, you know, anyone that's kind of got a lot of money and they don't know what to do with it, like, mental health research would be a really good idea, particularly with the drugs that we've got that again aren't getting passed because a lot of them are illegal, and, you know, there's strict constraints on them. I think if the people who've got the bureaucratic tape there was to kind of like loosen up a little bit, we'd probably find some solution to having depression, or at least a way of managing it, because obviously it's got an evolutionary advantage, but not to the point where it's kind of, you know, where your body's programming you to kill yourself. Like, there's a problem there, isn't it? Or is that an evolutionary advantage? You know, if you kill yourself, you don't pass on your genes, and then you don't make everybody else have depression in the future. You never know. It also looked at a contrast with Alzheimer's, and it was talking about how, like, plaques on the brain might be caused by, like, aggravated macrophage, and so then again it's another explanation of inflammation in the body. So it's kind of opening up a new avenue to kind of look at what could be the cause of mental health on a biological, you know, without neglecting like the rest of the body. Like, don't just focus on the mind and your thoughts, what's going on in the mind. Like, think about the actual body and the processes of your body. If you're not keeping your body healthy, your mind's not going to be healthy either. So it's kind of like I think people will probably look back at this book in, you know, 50 years time and think, yeah, that was kind of a groundbreaking kind of new avenue, or maybe it'll be completely forgotten and it'll be completely useless. So it's kind of one of those. It's a little bit of a tipping point in book, I think, that might get people thinking a little bit differently about how they approach mental health issues, because it is a pandemic and it is kind of getting worse. So yeah, I enjoyed it, but I got a little bit bored towards the end because it was quite repetitive, and it was quite like he was trying to make up words. It was like a kind of, okay, this is my theory, but then I've not got much else to say about it. So it was good to start off with. I enjoyed it at first, but it could have been a lot better.